welcome back. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our first project inside of Visual Studio, and we're going to write our first program inside of this. So it's very exciting. It's something that you probably have been waiting forever to do from the last video here. So let's go ahead and get to it. To make a new project, we need to go to File, New, then Project, or you can hit Control-Shift-N if you like shortcuts. I definitely like shortcuts. It will bring you to this menu here, this pop-up. Then you can select Visual C++, and then the subcategory here, Win32, and then select Win32 Console Application. Make sure it says the word console in there. Then all we need to do is name our project, which is going to be referred to as our solution. So it's the same thing, a project here. And then the location that we want it saved at. So currently it saves to the default, which the default path is your main drive, which is the C drive, your current logged in user. So I'm on a workstation here that has a code name, and under documents folder of that username, and the current edition of Visual Studio 2013 is the edition that I'm using, so it'll be under that folder, and then projects. So I'm going to go ahead and have you guys use this formatting, which is from the syllabus, so it's not anything that I'm pulling out of thin air. Use your first name and your last name, underscore, project name. In this case here, it is Hello World. And notice too how I type each new word starting with a capital letter. That's a formatting thing also as well. You're going to see that commonly used throughout the rest of this course here. It's actually called camel case if you guys want to see what that is, and that's camel case. You guys want to look that up here. We will talk more about it later. But here I have a project named. I have a path for it to save in. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now this wizard pops up, and in this wizard we definitely don't want to just hit finish. We want to hit next, and we want to have the additional option here, empty project, checked. Everything that we create inside of this course will be an empty project. So this would be something that you will do from here on out, is make sure that you select an empty project anytime that you create a new project or solution. Now I'm going to hit finish. Okay, we see some stuff populate. We now have a working project here inside of this pane here, which is a Solution Explorer. We see all these folders which have things that we can put things into, and what we're needing to do here in order to get going is we have a shell. We need to add content to this project. We need to add the source file main. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is all I did was let me do this again. I right clicked on source file, hit add new item. I want to add a new item, and then .cpp, which just stands for C++. So .cpp is every source file that we make is going to have a .cpp there. There will be other files a little bit later, but we're not going to be worrying about those right now. We need to name this here. Since it's our main function, we want to make sure it's main.cpp. We're going to add that to our project here. Now the name of this here isn't so important, but it's very easy for us to look at and say that's the file that contains our main. So now we have everything set up and ready to go, and here you can see that I can actually start typing inside of this editor. I want to back up though and make sure that you have everything laid out the way that you want to from the start rather than a little bit later. Now one thing that kind of drives me nuts, and this may be just me personally, is that I think that this is way too bright. Now what do I mean by this application here? This program is way too bright. I have trouble with this contrast here. To me, a lot of the lighter colors tend to be really bright on my eyes here. So Visual Studio does contain the ability to change the color theme from a different set of presets here. If I choose the dark theme, there we go. It kind of tones everything down here, and it makes it a little bit easier on at least my eyes here. I don't know how yours are. So that's something that you can experiment with if you like the different contrast. Maybe colors are a little bit better on one of the other settings, maybe you can take a look into that. So that's just something that you can do. And this is underneath tools and options. Okay, so it's not magic. Here we go, tools, options. And that was underneath environment in general. Okay. If I were to expand, if I scroll down a little bit here and I see text editor, here's another thing that is very helpful and something you'll probably want to turn on your home machine here, is if you go underneath all languages, underneath text editor, you can check this box that says line numbers. Now, line numbers, the reason why that's helpful is it just puts a number next to the line. So here you can tell what line you have maybe an error on, or how many, what you know, just for organizational purposes, which line you will need to actually put functionality on, because without this here, without the line numbers, it may be a little hard to keep track of where it is if you throw an error down here, where the error actually exists without the line numbers. So this is just kind of a helpful thing. So if you, again, that's underneath text editor, all languages, so you can specifically set it for just the C++ language if you'd like. Since this course is an introductory course, just select all languages and then hit line numbers there. There we go. Okay. So now we're ready to start our program. The first thing, and this is the first question that I'll pose to you guys, is what do we do first? If you watch the other video says that first should come our comment, our student comment of who we are, what it is we're doing, when we're doing it, and why. And that is like so. We have name up here, which would be like that. Student ID is another very helpful thing for identification. Okay. The date is very helpful for identification here, to figure out what date this was submitted on. And lastly, the assignment. Okay. So for this here, the assignment will be hello world. Now you're not actually turning this assignment in, but this is just a demo of how I would like to see this laid out. Now what does this do? All this does is lay a comment that does absolutely nothing to your source code, except let me know what it is that is going on here with your name, your student ID, your date, and the assignment, so that I can keep track of who you are. If I get just because if I get 30 files that are all named the same thing, I just need to be able to differentiate between whose is whose. So this is something that I need on every single source file that you turn in. That's just a comment. Okay, so the first thing after the comment, as we were talking about, was preprocessor, which is our include directive that we need to pull in here. Now we know that we're going to be outputting text to a console window. So in order to do that, we need to include the functionality of IOStream, which is just standing for input output stream. And that's our preprocessor. Okay. From here, we need to have a namespace. And every program that we write is going to contain this namespace. If we don't have this namespace here, we have to redefine each object that we use from this library as it occurs in line, and that's a real big pain. So we definitely want to avoid that. We'll use a namespace so that it just says, hey, for everything that I'm using out of this library here, here's a definition, and go on, so that we can just use a very simple word that will mean that object. And I'll expand upon that a little bit later. I know that might be a little confusing up front, but it will make sense as time progresses. So now we have our preprocessor, we have our namespace. Now we need our main function. Our main function is of the type int. It uses lowercase main. Again, C++ is a case-sensitive language, so uppercase in any of these parts here will mean a completely different thing. Okay, so data type, then the name of the function, and then we have this open and closed parentheses here. Now there's nothing inside of this here. We'll get to that a little bit later on actually providing arguments for these functions here. That is definitely not a part of this first tutorial here. Again, you'll just simply write this stuff out here, and over time you will actually assign more in-depth meaning behind what this actually means. Now, these curly braces that are here, the easiest way to do these is to actually just type them up together. And then if you hit the enter key in between them, you can put a few spaces between there. These are like our buns for our hamburger here. This contains all of the stuff inside, which is the body of the function. Here's where we're going to put all of our functionality, is inside of this main function here. So everything that we write as far as instructions go are all going to be inside of this body of main that are contained by these curly braces. This tells it when to start, when to stop. Okay, now I'm going to elect to do our return statement first. Because this has a return type of an integer, which is a number here, a whole number, we want to make sure that we have our return type. Now, a very important formatting issue here that we have is that everything you see has no spaces in front of it. It's all very left justified here, and we want to make sure that we keep a very easy to read formatting structure, because that's what this is at the end of the day, is that this language exists so that we as humans could be able to easily read through it and identify it. So the computer doesn't actually need to see any of this formatting that we're presenting here right now. The reason why it exists is for us as humans to be able to easily read through it. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, if that's the case, I can keep track of it. Why can't I just, use the formatting as a guide rather than an absolute rule? And the reason actually is pretty simple. If you were to take your code and give it to another person without a series of standardized habits or formatting, say this source file gets 300 or 600 or a couple thousand lines long of code, and your code is just absolutely a mess, there's no real easy way for that other engineer to go through your code and easily be able to digest it and read it. So by having a standardized formatting system, it makes it to where no matter what you're doing or who you're submitting it to, there's a standardized way to read the code. So we're going to follow all of the standardized coding habits and methods throughout this course, and you'll see these pretty early on. In fact, our first one here is actually going to be inside of the main function here. Anytime that you have a function or something that is of, say, a structure here, a container, we're going to tab in any statement that's inside of that one time to show that it is a child of that structure. So here I'm going to write the return statement with one tab space, return, and we're looking for an integer, which is 0. Okay. So now it is returning the integer 0. And again, this could return any number. I could return 5. I could return anything that I want as long as it's an integer. The reason why we're returning 0 is actually it's an error code that we're returning, and that's what it will resolve to. And it just means that this is run successfully and everything's good. So we're not just going to stick any old number in there. We're going to return 0 for main here, just a signal. You use it like a flag system. So it may not make sense again to right now. For now, just make sure that you're returning 0 inside of main, and everything looks just like this. So now this is kind of our basic template, our shell for everything that we're going to write practically for the rest of this course here and the next course after this. This is probably what you're going to see in every C++ assignment from here on out. So now we need to actually write our functionality inside of this. Now I showed you the cout object, which stands for console out. So if we want to actually output the sentence hello world to the console, then what we need to do is we need to use that cout object. To use that, we're going to use the keyword cout. Then we're going to use the stream insertion operator. Now these chevrons here, you may be wondering how to keep track of what, because there's these chevrons, which way should they be pointing? And since this is output here, the quotations that we're going to put here, which is going to contain our hello world here, think of this as the text here is pointing out to cout. Okay, so it's going out, so that's output. All right, so that should help you with the direction of which way these should go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave this as it is and not put a semicolon on the end of this, even though I know that there's supposed to be a semicolon here. And the reason why I'm doing this is to intentionally invoke an error here. Now you see automatically, just like there would be in Word or any other word processing program here, you see the squiggly line. And that's usually an error in any other program. It's the same thing here. And if I hover over it, it says, error expected a semicolon. Okay, well, that's fine. Let's actually build this program. To build the program, you can hit Control F5, or you can go to Debug and then start without debugging. Just also Control F5. Now you see that down here in the output window here, we see that 0 succeeded, 1 failed. This is just our summary of trying to build this source code to an actual executable file and run the code. And we see that it failed. So we get this pop-up here that says there were build errors. Would you like to continue and run the latest successful build? I'm going to hit no, and then it tells me what my errors are. Now, some of you might be reading these error codes and saying, this isn't really this isn't helpful at all. If you double-click on it, it's supposed to take you to where it perceives the error exists. And if you read it closely, it says syntax missing semicolon before return. And that's due to that we forgot the semicolon on the end of this statement here. This is a complete statement. So as soon as we put that semicolon on the end of this here, then everything's back to normal, it's good, and then we can rerun this code here and actually successfully run this. Now, chances are, in everything that you write here, when the line lights up and says, hey, there's an error here, chances are it may not actually be here. It may be something wrong with the line right above it. That's just something to look out for. All right, so now I'm ready to run this code. I'm going to go ahead and, again, start without debugging. And I'm going to move my console window over here, and you can actually see, hello world. We did it. We wrote our first program. Now you see this press any key to continue after this. It kind of jammed it next to our hello world, and it's not really, it doesn't really look that great. So what I'm going to do is, and all I did was just hit a key, and that exited the window, is I'm going to use that other, remember that fourth part that we were talking about with the cout object? If we were to put another stream insertion operator, which again is an operator, the operator goes between two pieces of data here, and then type endline, which is ENDL, that is not a 1, and it's a very common mistake, is that is not a 1. It just stands for endline. Now, what that does is it says, hey, go ahead and begin the next thing on a new line. It's like hitting the enter key. So I'm going to bring my console window back over here, and now I see hello world, and then it ended the line, and then press any key to continue. Now, why does this press any key to continue come up? Well, with this type of program here, if it's just displaying text out to a console window, it will execute that instruction and then be done with it. So it doesn't actually need to keep the window open. So when you run this here, and you were not to start without debugging, or if you were to run this with a full-on executable, then it would literally just flash the window and you would never even actually see anything. It would be instantaneous. You wouldn't see anything because there's nothing to do. It's print this out, then close. Well, it printed it out and it closed, and it happened so fast in a blink of an eye that you didn't even see it. So what it does as a courtesy is holds the window open and then just says, hey, when you're done with this, just hit any key on the keyboard, and I'll go ahead and close this window. So that's why this press any key to continue actually exists. It's not part of our program here. It's just part of the console. So one thing to note is that now that we understand this here with this literal text, it will print anything that you put between these quotations here. Anything, or say nothing. Say, for instance, if I was to put my name here, Now let's put a bunch of spaces here, just like this. You maybe see like, what is the space? Is it nothing? You'll see that it actually prints all of those spaces, anything that's contained within inside of these quotations here. So it will print anything. And because the space is actually a character, it's actually a character that is represented on the ASCII character list here, which is everything that we can possibly type in with using the keyboard. So it will print anything that you give it. And from there, you can print other statements as well. On other lines. Sorry there, here we go. Move this here, and there it is. Cool. So we can build a series of text from this here, and we know now that anything that we put together here, it will print that out. If I were to use the endline, the endline keyword here, then we know that that's going to move it to the next line. If I were to, with one statement, I'm going to delete line 13 here, come back up here. If I was to say I want Tim to be on one line and Prior to be on another line, what I can do is I can end this here, end the quotations, and just have two separate quotations here. Between these, I'm going to need to put the stream insertion operator. And I'm going to need to end the line so that Tim will be on one line, then the line's going to end, and then Prior is going to be on the next line. Run that, move my console window over, here it is. Tim is on one line, the line ends, we start a new line. Prior's on the next line, we end the line, and then our next text after that is just the console closing saying, hey, I'm done. Okay, last but not least, I want to show you real quick how to actually access your main.cpp file. Now remember how I told you we were going over the path and starting the actual project? We saw that the default path was the username that you were logged into, the documents folder. Then from the documents folder, it's the version of Visual Studio that you're using. I'm using 2013 in this case. And then you have a projects folder. Another easy way to get there is if you actually highlight right here the solution underneath the Solution Explorer, right click on that, second from the last option on the bottom here, open Folder in File Explorer. You'll actually see that it takes you to that folder. Now what we're looking for here is our main.cpp. It's actually contained within inside of one more folder that's the same name as our project. And once we click there, we'll see main.cpp there. That's the file that we want to upload to Blackboard. It's a C++ source file, which is our .cpp. Okay, a lot of students will actually grab something like this here, which is the solution file. Sadly, I can't do anything with that. That's not a complete project, so I can't actually open your source for that. So for grading, I absolutely need this main.cpp file, which is the source file that contains main inside of your program. If I do not have that, I cannot assign the grade to your account here. So I absolutely need to make sure that that's there. Again, to get there, the easiest way, right click here, open folder in File Explorer, go one more level in, there it is right there, main.cpp, and you'll see this little icon there as well too, CPP source. If you're still not sure that that's the actual right one, if you go to properties, you'll see that it's a .cpp file. Okay, hopefully that's given you enough to work with here. From here, I'd like you guys to take a look at your first assignment and go ahead and review that and see if you can complete it. Upload your main.cpp file. Make sure that your comments are in the header. Without this here, I cannot assign a grade to you. So make sure that that is absolutely there in order to receive points for your project. So take a look at that and let me know what you think. I wish you all the best of luck and take care. Thank you.